We have more MCQs. Question shows a food chain consisting of a large tree, small insect, small bird, and large bird. It asks, which pyramid of numbers is based on the food chain shown? To answer this, think about the number of organisms at each trophic level. A single large tree can support many small insects. Those insects support a smaller number of small birds, which in turn support an even smaller number of large birds. Therefore, the pyramid of numbers will have a narrow base representing the single tree, a wide section for the many insects, and then it will gradually become narrower for the birds. Hence, C is the correct answer. Next, question shows the movement of carbon in the carbon cycle in gigatons per year and asks, how many gigatons of carbon are moved by respiration each year? To solve this question, look at all the arrows representing respiration. Respiration occurs in plants, animals, and decomposes, all of which release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. Adding the values shown for these respiration pathways gives a total of 120 gigatons of carbon per year. Therefore, A is the correct answer. Moving on to question, it states, energy is lost from a food chain from one trophic level to the next. How is energy lost from a food chain? The processes listed are digestion, respiration, photosynthesis, and excretion. Energy is lost through digestion because undigested food leaves the body. Energy is also lost through respiration as heat is released to the surroundings. In addition, energy is lost through excretion because waste products still contain chemical energy. However, photosynthesis does not cause energy loss from a food chain, instead, it introduces energy into the ecosystem from sunlight. Therefore, B is the correct answer. Then next, question shows the nitrogen cycle and asks, which stages involve bacteria? To answer this, identify the stages where bacteria play a role. Bacteria are responsible for nitrogen fixation, ammonification, nitrification, and denitrification. These processes correspond to stages 2, 5, 6, and 7 in the diagram. Therefore, B is the correct answer. Now let's move on to the next paper 2 question. Part A shows figure 2.1, which is a food web from a pond. It includes a hawk, snake, frog, water shrew, freshwater snail, insect larva, water weed, and algae. First part asks, state the source of energy for this food web. This is a simple recall question. In every ecosystem, the original source of energy is the sun. Producers capture sunlight during photosynthesis, and this energy is then transferred through the food web. So the answer we write is, the sun is the source of energy for this food web. Next, part asks, complete table 2.1 by writing the number of different organisms in this food web that fit each description. To answer this, carefully identify the organisms in the food web. The producers have already been given as 2. Then count the organisms that feed on primary consumers to determine the number of secondary consumers. After that, count all the organisms that feed on other animals to determine the number of carnivores. So the answers we write are, secondary consumers are 2 and carnivores 4. Now, part 3 asks, the hawk feeds at 2 different trophic levels. Use figure 2.1 to explain this statement. Look carefully at the different feeding pathways in the food web. When the hawk feeds on snakes, the food has already passed through 4 organisms before reaching the hawk. This places the hawk at the 5th trophic level, making it a quaternary consumer. However, when the hawk feeds on water shrews, the food has passed through only 3 organisms. In this case, the hawk is feeding at the 4th trophic level and acts as a tertiary consumer. So the answer we write is, when the hawk feeds on snakes, it is feeding at the 5th trophic level, which is a quaternary consumer. When it feeds on water shrews, it is feeding at the 4th trophic level, which is a tertiary consumer. Now let's move on to part B. The background information explains that scientists have studied how water shrews feed on freshwater snails and insect larvae. The shrews dive underwater to collect food. Next one asks, explain why shrews need more oxygen when they dive underwater, which is very cold. Remember that shrews are mammals, and mammals regulate their body temperature. In very cold water, they lose heat more quickly, so they need a higher rate of respiration to generate enough heat and energy to maintain their body temperature. They also need more energy for increased muscle contraction while swimming and diving. Since respiration requires oxygen, they need more oxygen while underwater. So the answer we write is, shrews regulate their body temperature. Oxygen is needed for respiration. Respiration releases heat. More energy is also needed for increased muscle contraction while diving in cold water. Then it asks, scientists have found that shrews contain high levels of a special protein that can store oxygen. This allows the shrews to stay underwater for longer to collect food. Explain how the ability of shrews to store oxygen may have developed by natural selection. This is a natural selection question, so explain it step by step. So the answer we write is, some water shrews have more oxygen storing protein due to a mutation. Water shrews compete for food. Water shrews that have the protein can collect more food. These shrews are more likely to survive and reproduce. They pass the alleles for the protein to the next generation. Now let's move on to next one. Part A asks, explain how the increasing concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is causing global warming. To answer this, remember that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. Sunlight can pass through the atmosphere and reach the Earth's surface. The Earth then releases this energy as heat, but carbon dioxide absorbs and traps some of this heat, preventing it from escaping into space. As more carbon dioxide accumulates in the atmosphere, more heat is trapped, causing the Earth's average temperature to rise. So the answer we write is, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. Energy from the sun can penetrate the atmosphere, but heat energy is absorbed and trapped by carbon dioxide, preventing it from escaping into space, causing global warming. Next, Part B explains that scientists plan to grow large areas of seaweed in the ocean to absorb carbon dioxide through photosynthesis. It asks, complete the balanced symbol equation for photosynthesis. This is a direct recall question, so we simply write 6CO2 plus 6H2O makes C6H12O6 plus 6O2. Next question then asks, the scientists estimate that the seaweed will double in biomass every 10 days. If they start with 2 tons of seaweed, calculate the biomass expected after 40 days of growth. Since the biomass doubles every 10 days, it doubles 4 times in 40 days. Starting with 2 tons, it becomes 4 tons after 10 days, 8 tons after 20 days, 16 tons after 30 days, and 32 tons after 40 days. So the answer we write is, biomass equals 32 tons. Now let's move to Part C, which asks, nitrates are one of the minerals that will be supplied to the seaweed. Explain the importance of nitrates to plants. Recall that plants need nitrates to make amino acids, and amino acids are then used to make proteins. These proteins are essential for growth and the formation of new cells. So the answer we write is, nitrates are used to make amino acids, which are used to make proteins. Next question explains that the bundles of seaweed sink to the bottom of the ocean, where there is very little oxygen. It then asks, explain how this will help the carbon to stay trapped in the dead seaweed. Think about what decomposers need to break down dead organisms. They require oxygen for aerobic respiration. Since there is very little oxygen at the bottom of the ocean, decomposition occurs very slowly. As a result, the carbon stored in the seaweed remains trapped instead of being released back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. So the answer we write is, there is very little oxygen, so decomposition does not occur because decomposers need oxygen for respiration. As a result, the carbon remains trapped in the dead seaweed. Now let's move to the next question. Next part asks, it is more energy efficient for humans to eat plants. Explain why. Think about the flow of energy in a food chain. Every time energy passes from one trophic level to the next, a large proportion is lost through respiration, movement, excretion, and heat. By eating plants directly, there are fewer energy transfers, so less energy is lost and more is available to humans. So the answer we write is, it is more energy efficient for humans to eat plants because there are fewer energy transfers involved. Energy is lost to the environment at each energy transfer, so less energy is wasted when plants are eaten directly. Finally, Part D asks, if humans reduce the amount of animal protein they eat, then less agricultural land is required. Suggest 3 environmental benefits of reducing the amount of land used for agriculture. Since less land is needed, fewer forests need to be cleared, allowing natural habitats to be preserved and biodiversity to increase. There is also less need for fertilizers, herbicides, and insecticides, reducing pollution of soil and water. In addition, keeping fewer livestock means less methane is released into the atmosphere, helping to reduce global warming and climate change. So the answers we write are, less deforestation means more land and habitats are available for wildlife. Reduced use of fertilizers, herbicides and insecticides decreases pollution. Less methane is produced, reducing global warming and climate change.